And this is why spirituality for the hundreds or thousands of years have suggested that in order to not be bound by the confines of one's inner world or ego, that one has to start to open up to the unknown. Of course, in most spiritual people's minds, when you say the unknown, they get sort of mystical and foggy-eyed, as if they're talking about there's a realm out there called the unknown, right? The unknown isn't a realm out there. It's not a mystical realm of the unknown, or it's so extraordinary that I can't possibly know it. No, the unknown is actually much more practical. It's like right here. The unknown is actually right. This is the unknown. You don't know what the heck's going to happen 1 second from now. There's no real truth that somebody should show up at your house at 6 o'clock if they say they should. I mean, if you've agreed upon that, well and good, but it's not written up there in the sky anywhere. That you don't actually, all the things we think we know, and of course, the things we think we know, we believe emotionally that they have basis in some sort of reality. So when the spiritual teachings have talked about the unknown, they're not talking about a mystically, induced inner experience that would be called the unknown. What really they're saying is that the world as each of us has hooked up in our minds, if you ever want to escape the confines of that world, you have to open to the unknown. Which means you may have it all put together like that, but it only exists within your mind. Everywhere else, it doesn't exist. Whether it's one person's mind, or it's sort of a collective mind of our culture or whatever, but it actually only exists as a whole host of assumptions and belief patterns. And outside of that arbitrary agreement that we make, that we decide of what's true and real and what's not true and real. Outside of that, it has no reality whatsoever. It has no basis in what is. I think for most people, that's a big concept to really take in. And it's why we sort of project this idea of the unknown as something, some great big mystical reality out there somewhere else. As long as we can imagine the unknown as some realm or dimension of consciousness that I'll move into, then we don't have to see, then we don't have to recognize that we ourselves have trapped ourselves within everything we think we know. And the unknown is basically saying, all of that is arbitrary. It has no basis in reality at all. This is, of course, why when people get close to experiencing, to kind of getting open to the world outside of their little domain, their inner world, that they often start to feel a sort of irrational fear. Why am I so afraid? I'm sitting here meditating in this room and I'm terrified. What am I terrified? I don't know. I feel like I'm just about to be rendered into oblivion. There you are, sitting in a room. Nothing's happening as far as we know. Oblivion could come. One of those asteroids we read about could drop on your head. It's possible. In fact, it's almost guaranteed if you're around here for long enough. We're actually, running through a beltway of dangerous objects, but that's a whole other story. I don't know why I find that so funny, Something about it, I don't know. So often this is why one doesn't understand it necessarily. You don't really got it figured out, but at a certain point in your own process of opening spiritually, as many of you know in this room, that it's common to come into a sort of a domain of experience where you sort of feel a sort of irrational fear or anxiety, but you're not sure what it's all about. It may be connected to various memories and all that kind of stuff, but whenever you have fear, your present fear will connect itself automatically to every other fear, just to make sure that it all gets amped up really, really strong. It's almost like every time you experience fear, something inside you goes, yes, and remember all the other times you experienced fear? Here, let's visit all those. And before you know it, you've got this panic attack happening, when there was really nothing going on at all. But of course, the reason that becomes this sort of sense of fear, this term I heard growing up occasionally, it's in the culture, fear of God, the fear of God, and it's mentioned in some circles as if it's a wonderful thing. The fear of God, I don't know, but one of the things it could mean, it's most likely that you're just afraid of your idea of God. That's probably most likely, like God's going to come get you because you ate the cookie dough before your mother cooked it when you were like 10 years old. If that upsets God, by the way, I'm in desperate trouble. I ate entire batches of cookie dough when it was raw before my mother could make it. So if anybody worries about that, I'm afraid I'll be the first to be kicked into the fiery pits of hell. But there's that irrational fear at some point in your own opening. There's that sense of I'm just going to be rendered into oblivion. I'll be in some sense annihilated, even though I don't understand it, even though I can't make sense of it, even if I try to rationalize it, nothing seems to help. I feel like I'm going to be rendered into oblivion. And that sense is what you feel when you're getting at the boundary line between your worldview, your self-view, this immense collection of I knows, and what's just on the other side of that mind state, which is a realm in which none of that exists. And so in a certain sense, the fear is entirely rational. Because on the other side of that imaginary boundary between the world as we've got packaged and just what isness of life, that our world we do lose it. So in a certain sense it's rational because our world as we've got it packaged in our minds, and probably more significantly our self, gets annihilated. Annihilation's a big word though for the passing of a dream. Anybody that's gone through the experience of feeling this sort of inner annihilation, whether it be great or small, at the end of the day, all that is waking up from a nightmare. It's a dream. It's something that can it's only happening within the space of our own mind. So spiritual teachers, of course, have talked about for a very long time about the unknown. The unknown isn't somewhere far away. It's actually right outside the confines of the way we've got everything figured out. In a certain sense, certain spiritual teachings are meant to poke holes in parts of that construct. So when somebody asks, who am I? It's taking dead aim at your construct of yourself. And maybe if it hits right on target, it'll blast a hole in your idea of who you thought you were. And you'll find that it's not so bad to be out there where you don't have yourself all defined. It's actually pretty nice compared to where you were just from. But again, even when that happens, you're waking up from a thought. Nothing but a thought.